The room behind the bookshelf. Late one night, I stumbled upon a hidden door behind a bookshelf in my new apartment. It wasn't just a forgotten space. Something waited behind it. Something that shouldn't be disturbed. As I explored the room, I realized that I wasn't the only one who knew it was there. It was my first week in the new apartment, and so far, everything seemed perfect. The building was old but well maintained, and I had managed to find a place that felt like home after months of searching. But from the first day I moved in, there was something about this apartment that unsettled me, an odd sense of being watched. It wasn't constant, but it came in waves, usually late at night when the city outside was quiet. I had just unpacked the last of my boxes when I noticed something strange. There was a large antique bookshelf in the corner of the living room, an old piece of furniture that I assumed was just part of the apartment's charm. But when I stood in front of it, something felt off. I pushed it slightly to one side, expecting it to creak or make a sound, but it didn't move. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid. Maybe the apartment's age was messing with my mind. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to that bookshelf than I originally thought. I started inspecting the wall behind it, just out of curiosity, and I found a faint seam along the base of the bookshelf, almost like a door. It was barely visible, just a thin line that wasn't there when I first moved in. The more I looked at it, the more it seemed to beckon me. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I felt like something was hidden there. My instincts were telling me that whatever was behind that wall wasn't meant to be found. But of course, curiosity got the best of me. After a couple of days of pacing around the apartment, I finally decided to take a closer look. That evening, after a long day of work, I grabbed a flashlight and went to the bookshelf. I could feel my heart beating faster as I ran my fingers along the seam. I pushed on it, gently at first, but nothing happened. The wall didn't budge. I pushed harder, pressing the flashlight to the side of the bookshelf, trying to find any signs of a mechanism or something that would trigger a door opening. Suddenly I heard a faint click, like a lock being released. My breath caught in my throat as the bookshelf slowly moved. It was as though the wall behind it had been waiting for someone to trigger the release. The air around me grew cold. The sound of the bookshelf shifting echoed through the room. My eyes widened as I saw a dark opening behind it, just wide enough for me to squeeze through. The dim light from my flashlight revealed only a small, narrow passage. I didn't know what to think. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to step forward or leave it alone. I wanted to turn around and forget about it, but my curiosity was overpowering. I couldn't resist. Something told me I had to know what was behind that door. It wasn't just the mystery. It felt like I was meant to find it. I took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. As I entered, the air became thicker, cooler, and the sound of my footsteps echoed around me. The flashlight illuminated the narrow path ahead, but there was something unsettling about the place. The walls felt damp, almost as if they were sweating. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I walked cautiously, trying not to make too much noise. The passage seemed to stretch on forever. It felt like time was bending in that space. The flashlight flickered a few times, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I kept moving forward, unable to shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching me. After what seemed like an eternity, the passage finally opened up into a small hidden room. The walls were covered in dust and old yellowing paper. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years, maybe decades. There were no windows, and the only source of light was my flashlight, which flickered once more before stabilizing. I scanned the room quickly, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. On the far side of the room was a desk, cluttered with old papers, and beside it, a small wooden chest. My curiosity was piqued even further, but a strange feeling of dread began to creep over me. I stepped closer to the chest, feeling an odd sense of urgency. What could be in there? Why was it hidden in this secret room? I felt like I had to open it, but part of me knew I was about to uncover something that I might regret finding. As I reached for the chest, the air grew even colder. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The room seemed to close in around me. I opened the chest, and what I saw inside made my stomach turn. It wasn't treasure. It wasn't anything beautiful or valuable. Instead, there were old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a small journal. The photos were of a family, a mother, father, and child, smiling together in front of what looked like the very building I was standing in. I flipped through the pages of the journal, reading the scribbled words in a hurried, erratic handwriting. The entries were disturbing. The writer, who I assumed must have been the father, described strange occurrences happening in the house, shadows moving on their own, whispers in the walls, and unexplained cold spots. But what sent a chill down my spine were the final words, hastily written in red ink. "They're still here. They never left. Don't open the door." My heart raced, and I froze. I suddenly understood why that room had been hidden. It wasn't just a forgotten space. It was a warning. But who had left it? And who, or what, was still here? The flashlight flickered again, and that's when I heard it. A noise. A soft shuffle, like footsteps approaching from behind me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The footsteps were faint, but unmistakable. They sounded like someone, or something, moving slowly toward me. My heart pounded in my chest, and the flashlight flickered again, casting shadows that seemed to move with a mind of their own. I spun around, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of life. There was no one there, just the empty, dust-covered space with its strange, forgotten objects. My pulse quickened, and I took a step back, my hand shaking as I held the flashlight out in front of me. The footsteps continued, growing louder, closer. I turned back toward the chest, trying to steady myself. The journal's pages fluttered in the breeze, though the air felt completely still. It was impossible to ignore the sensation that something was moving behind me, watching, waiting. I grabbed the journal and shoved it into my bag, then back toward the narrow passage. The sound of footsteps was now almost right behind me. The walls of the hidden room seemed to press in tighter as the noise grew more distinct. It wasn't just footsteps anymore. It was breathing, ragged and uneven, coming from the dark corner of the room. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move fast enough. My legs felt like they were stuck in quicksand as I stumbled toward the door. I could feel a cold breath on the back of my neck, and I turned just in time to see the shadow of something, or someone, standing in the doorway. It was vague, blurry, like a human shape, but distorted, twisted by the darkness. Panic surged through me, and I ran, pushing past the bookshelf as I stumbled into the living room. My heart raced, my mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. I turned back to see the bookshelf slowly shifting back into place, closing off the hidden room once more. I breathed heavily, trying to shake off the lingering sense of dread that clung to me. I had to get out of there. I had to leave, but something told me I couldn't. That room, whatever it was, wasn't going to let me go that easily. I spent the next few days trying to ignore what happened, convincing myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, that dark shape watching me from the doorway. And every time I walked past the bookshelf, I could feel its cold presence, as if it was waiting for me to come back. The apartment, which had seemed so charming and safe when I first moved in, now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me, the silence louder than ever. I started hearing noises at night, faint whispers that I couldn't understand but felt deep in my bones. The air grew colder with each passing day, and no matter how much I tried to shake it off, I couldn't escape the feeling that I wasn't alone. Then, one evening, after a particularly long and sleepless night, I decided to investigate again. I had to know what was really behind that door. I couldn't live with the uncertainty. Maybe, just maybe, there was an explanation for everything. Maybe I could prove that I wasn't losing my mind. I went back to the bookshelf, my hands trembling as I placed them on the cold wood. I pushed against it, waiting for the familiar click, the release of the hidden door. But this time, nothing happened. The bookshelf didn't budge. I pushed harder, gritting my teeth, but it remained solid. Frustration boiled over and I slammed my fist against the wall next to the bookshelf. The sound echoed through the room. And then, just as I thought I was about to give up, I heard it. A low, guttural growl coming from behind the bookshelf. I froze, my body going rigid with fear. The growl was low, menacing, almost as if something was trapped behind the wall, waiting to break free. My mind raced as I stood there, unable to move. And then, the bookshelf slowly, almost reluctantly, began to shift. The seam in the wall reappeared, wider this time, as if the room itself was reluctantly revealing its secret. I backed away, heart pounding in my chest. Whatever was in there, whatever was behind that wall, didn't want to be found. But it was too late. The door had already opened. With trembling hands, I stepped inside once more. The air colder than before. The room felt suffocating, the walls pressing in tighter. My flashlight flickered as I shined it into the darkness. But this time, the shadows seemed to move on their own. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the whispers were louder now, swirling around me. I could hear footsteps again, but they weren't mine. They were coming from deeper within the room. I turned toward the sound, my breath shallow, my heart in my throat. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. But there was something wrong about him. His face was gaunt, pale, and his eyes, they were wide open, empty, like he'd been staring into nothingness for years. His mouth was open, as if he was trying to speak, but no words came out. He didn't move, just stood there, staring at me. I stumbled back, gasping for air, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My mind couldn't process it. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. And then with a cold, inhuman voice, the figure whispered, "You shouldn't have opened the door." The stranger in the window. It started with the sound of soft tapping against my window, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. But when I pulled back the blinds, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Someone standing in the yard, staring into my room, and they didn't move. It was one of those evenings where everything felt too quiet. I had just finished dinner and was sitting in the living room of my small apartment. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and the occasional creak of the floorboards as I shifted on the couch. The street lights outside flickered, casting faint glows that barely illuminated the yard. I hadn't noticed how dark it had gotten until I heard it. I jumped, startled by the sound. At first I thought it was the wind, or maybe a tree branch brushing against the window. But it came again. It was coming from the window right next to me. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The window was slightly cracked open, just enough to let the cool night air in. I could hear the soft rustle of leaves outside. But this sound was different. It was deliberate. I stood up slowly, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. I walked cautiously over to the window, my steps almost inaudible in the stillness of the room. The tapping continued, each strike seeming to grow louder. I hesitated before pulling the blinds open just a bit. My breath caught in my throat when I saw what was outside. A figure, a person standing in my yard, staring directly at me. At first, I thought maybe it was a neighbor or someone who had wandered too close to my window by accident. But there was something off about the way they stood, still, unmoving, like a statue. Their posture was too rigid, Too unnatural. I blinked, unsure of what to do. My mind raced. Was I just imagining things? I must be. It was late, and I was tired. But as I looked more closely, I realized something chilling. The person was staring at me. Not just glancing, but staring directly into the window, locking eyes with me. I felt a chill run down my spine, and I quickly pulled the blind shut, heart pounding in my chest. I backed away from the window, my legs unsteady. It had to be a mistake. Maybe it was just someone out for a late-night walk, or maybe I'd seen shadows playing tricks on my mind. I sat back down on the couch, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The sound came again. This time, it was louder, more insistent, as if the person on the other side of the window was demanding my attention. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped, unsure whether I should call someone or just ignore it. It didn't make sense. Why would someone be standing out there in the dark, just staring at my window? I got up again, my hands shaking as I reached for the blinds. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly lifted them, half expecting to see nothing at all, convinced that my mind was playing tricks on me. But there, standing in the same spot, was the figure. This time, I could see more clearly. The person was tall, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured most of their face, except for their eyes. They were wide open, dark and emotionless, staring through the window with a cold, almost robotic intensity. The tapping came again, but it wasn't coming from the window anymore. It was coming from the door. My heart skipped a beat. I turned to look at the front door, my blood running cold. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, my breaths growing shallow. I was paralyzed for a moment, unsure of what to do. I had to act fast. I rushed to the hallway, my pulse racing as I grabbed my phone. My fingers fumbled with the screen, trying to dial 911, but my hands were shaking so badly that it took me a minute to hit the right numbers. As the phone began to ring, I heard the sound of footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, scraping against the pavement. Whoever this person was, they were moving closer to the door. The 911 operator answered, her voice calm and professional. 911. What's your emergency? I gasped for breath, trying to steady my voice. There's someone outside my house. They've been tapping on my window and now they're at the door. Stay inside and lock all the doors. Police are on their way. Can you confirm your address? I gave her my address, my voice trembling as I heard the footsteps stop just outside the door. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes trained on the door. I didn't dare look out the window again. The operator was still talking, but I couldn't hear her words over the pounding of my heart. The sound came again, but this time it was more forceful. Someone was knocking, loudly. I couldn't breathe. I pressed my back against the wall, my legs weak. My mind raced, but I couldn't think. I didn't know what to do. I heard something scrape against the door handle, the metal twisting and rattling. My stomach dropped. I glanced at the window, but I didn't see the figure anymore. They were gone. The yard was empty. Then, as if on cue, the tapping stopped. My heart raced as I stood in the dead silence of the room, barely able to breathe. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified. The knocking had stopped, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I stood frozen, staring at the door. It felt like an eternity had passed, though only a few seconds had actually gone by. The sound came again, this time from the window. My eyes widened in terror. How had they moved so quickly? My breath hitched in my throat as I backed away, my pulse pounding in my ears. I couldn't look. I couldn't think. I just needed to get out of the house, to find safety. But my legs felt like lead, and I couldn't force myself to move. The phone still clutched in my trembling hand. I heard the operator's voice again. coming through the speaker. "Are you still there? The police are on their way. Are you safe?" I could barely speak. They're at the window." There was a long pause. Then the operator responded, her voice tight with concern. "Stay away from the windows. Stay on the phone with me. Do you have any way to escape the house? Is there a back door or a window you can get to?" I turned toward the back of the apartment, my eyes darting around the dimly lit room. The back door was right there, just a few steps away. But would I be able to get out before they noticed? I glanced at the window again. The figure was still there, standing just outside, staring at me through the glass. They hadn't moved, their expression still unreadable. Suddenly, I saw something that made my stomach drop. They raised their hands slowly and began tapping on the glass with one finger. I could hear each strike echoing in the silence, each sound sharper than the last. The tapping grew faster, more insistent, like they were demanding something from me. I felt paralyzed, unable to look away. My hands were slick with sweat as I pressed the phone to my ear, waiting for the operator to say something that would calm my nerves. But nothing could calm me now. I took a slow, steadying breath, forcing myself to focus. I needed to escape. I couldn't stay here any longer, not with them standing there, waiting. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait for the police to arrive. Without thinking, I crept toward the back door, trying to make as little noise as possible. My heart thudded in my chest with every step I took. I reached the door, my hand hovering over the knob. Knocking was relentless now, coming from both the window and the door. I had no idea how they were moving around so quickly, but it didn't matter. My fear was consuming me. I twisted the knob, but the door was stuck. I yanked at it, my breath quickening. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me. I turned back to look at the window again, but now the figure was gone. The yard was empty. The window was just as dark as the rest of the apartment. I didn't know if I should feel relieved or terrified. Where had they gone? Why had they stopped knocking? Then, without warning, I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. I whirled around, my heart leaping into my throat. Something, or someone, had broken into the house. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, holding it like a weapon, my breath ragged. I slowly made my way to the kitchen, my ears straining for any sound. The silence was maddening. I could hear nothing but the thumping of my own heart and the faint buzz of the refrigerator. When I entered the kitchen, I saw it. The window. The glass was shattered, pieces of it scattered across the floor. The window wasn't even open. It had been smashed from the outside. Whoever had been tapping at the window was inside now. I didn't know what to do. I was trapped. I couldn't escape through the back door, and I couldn't stay here. My mind raced, thinking of anything I could do, any way out. Footsteps. I froze. They were coming toward me. I ducked behind the kitchen counter, my eyes scanning the room. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just at the edge of the room. I held my breath, trying to stay as quiet as possible. Then, as if in response to my silence, a voice echoed through the house. Low, barely a whisper. "Are you going to hide from me all night?" The words sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I didn't recognize the voice, but it was chillingly calm. It felt like the voice of someone who had done this before. I pressed myself further against the counter, my heart hammering in my chest. The silence stretched on, and I couldn't hear any movement anymore. Was I alone? I slowly peeked over the edge of the counter, my eyes scanning the room. Nothing. Nothing. But something wasn't right. My eyes landed on the broken window in the kitchen. The shards of glass were still scattered across the floor, but I didn't see anyone in the yard. I didn't hear any footsteps. Had they already left? I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed my phone again. dialing 911 in a panic. I didn't know how much time had passed since I'd called before, but I didn't want to risk it. The phone rang, and I heard the operator's voice again, calm but urgent. 911. What's your emergency? There's someone in my house. I gasped. My voice panicked. They broke in. I don't know where they are. The operator responded immediately. Officers are close by. I need you to stay as quiet as possible. Do you have any way to lock the doors or secure yourself in a room? I couldn't respond. I was too scared to speak, my body frozen in place. I glanced around the room one last time, hoping that somehow the nightmare would end. But it didn't. I heard the soft shuffle of feet behind me. There was someone living in our walls. It started small, missing snacks, creaky floorboards, flickering lights. My dad thought I was imagining things. But one night, I left my phone recording while I slept. What it captured wasn't a dream or a rat. It was someone crawling out from inside the walls, and they'd been there for months. I used to feel safe at home. Even after Mom passed away, it was the one place that felt normal. It was just me and Dad, trying to hold things together in our little 2-bedroom rental outside Asheville. The house was old, creaky, but peaceful. At least it used to be. The first weird thing was food going missing. Not a ton, just little things. Granola bars, a pack of Oreos, a can of soda. I thought Dad was just snacking late at night, but he swore it wasn't him. He even accused me at one point, like I was sneaking food after dinner and lying about it. We laughed it off. No big deal. Then, the noises started. I sleep with a fan on, but I started waking up around 3 or 4 a.m. to these soft sounds, like shuffling. Not footsteps, more like something brushing against the walls. I figured it was rats in the attic or maybe raccoons, but it felt too close. Like it was coming from inside the wall, right behind my headboard. I told my dad. He just nodded. Said old houses make noise, especially when it's cold outside. That kind of dismissive, half-listening parent tone, but I couldn't ignore it. I started sleeping with one earbud in, music low enough that I could still hear the house. One night, I was lying there, completely still, and I heard it again. A light tapping, then something that sounded like heavy, muffled. I sat up, heart pounding, and turned on my bedside lamp. Nothing. Of course. The next day, I pushed my bed a few feet away from the wall. I didn't tell my dad. Then I started finding little things moved. A coaster I never used had been flipped over. My charger was unplugged. Once, the closet door was open when I swear I closed it. Again, small stuff. Enough to make me question myself, but not enough to sound the alarm. That changed after the night I left my phone recording. It was kind of a joke at first. I saw a TikTok about catching ghosts by recording your sleep. So I propped my phone on my dresser, aimed at my bed, hit record, and went to sleep. I didn't expect anything. The next morning, I almost deleted the video without watching it. But curiosity got me. I fast-forwarded through most of it. Just me tossing and turning under the covers. Nothing weird. Until about 3:37 a.m. The screen stayed dark for a moment. Then I saw movement. Not near me. Near the wall. Drywall shifted. Not like it cracked or collapsed, just moved inward, like pressure from behind. Then, slowly, a hand emerged. It was pale, dirt-stained, with long fingernails. The hand pushed against the seam of the wall behind my dresser. Then the rest of the arm, then a shoulder. The figure was impossibly thin. Male, I think, wearing tattered dark clothes. His face never turned toward the camera, but he moved with strange, practiced control. Like he'd done it before, he stepped into my room. He just stood there, watching me sleep for about 30 seconds. Then he slowly walked to the corner, squatted down, and watched me. At some point, about a minute later, he turned his head toward the dresser, toward the phone. I swear, I saw his eyes flash in the reflection. Then he backed up, step by step, and disappeared behind the wall again. The video was 8 minutes long. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I just sat there, staring at the paused screen, feeling cold all over. I ran to my dad's room, woke him up, and showed him the video. He thought it was a prank, like edited or staged, but he could tell I was shaking, crying. It was real. We called the cops that morning. They searched the entire house, attic to crawl space. In the wall cavity behind my room, they found a section that had been hollowed out. The insulation had been pushed aside. There were blankets, empty water bottles, wrappers, a flashlight, a knife. They said whoever was living there had probably been using old maintenance crawl spaces and attic access panels to move around the house. He must have entered through a loose vent outside, sometime during the winter when we had a leak in the back roof. He had likely been living there for weeks, maybe longer. I didn't sleep in that room again. We moved out within the month. Dad didn't even want to finish the lease. He paid extra to break it. Said no amount of rent savings was worth the nightmares I was having. I still have the video. I never posted it. It felt wrong. Like I was giving that man attention. But sometimes I wonder if someone else out there has gone through the same thing. And if they haven't checked their walls, maybe they should. After the police left, I thought things would be okay. But they weren't. The house didn't feel safe anymore. Even when we were gone, I kept hearing sounds in the back of my mind. In the silence of the night. Footsteps. Breathing. And worst of all, I kept seeing his face in my mind. It's not something I can describe easily. It wasn't that he had some hideous, terrifying face. It was just blank, hollow, like someone who had been alone for so long, they forgot how to feel anything. And in a weird way, it made it even worse. My dad thought moving was enough. He thought we'd closed the chapter and left it behind. But I knew it wasn't over. The moment we moved into a new apartment, I felt eyes on me. Eyes that weren't mine. But I couldn't stop feeling them. I tried to forget. I really did. I'd lock the door, pull the blinds shut, and try to ignore the memory of his cold, calculating presence in my room. But no matter how hard I tried to focus on school or making new friends, that nagging feeling never went away. A week after we settled into our new place, I heard it again. The sound of shuffling. I told myself it was the neighbors, that it was nothing. I tried to keep my mind calm, but every night it grew louder. One evening, while my dad was working late, I decided to investigate. I stood still in the middle of the apartment, listening. The sound was faint, but clear, coming from the ceiling. We lived on the second floor of the building, so I knew it wasn't anything happening in the apartment above. I had checked with the landlord when we moved in, and he'd said the upstairs tenants were just a couple of older people. Still, the sound continued, like something moving, scraping against the floor above me. I didn't even think about it at the time. I didn't even blink. I just grabbed my phone and recorded. And when I reviewed the footage later, my stomach dropped. At exactly 1:38 a.m., the same muffled sounds appeared on the recording, not from the ceiling, but from the wall. The wall that shared the bathroom between my room and the next apartment. That wall hadn't been there when we first moved in. My mind raced as I watched the slow, eerie motion of the wall in the video, as if something was pressed up against it. The shadow cast across the drywall was unmistakable. Someone, or something, was right on the other side. I didn't even have to think. My mind was already filled with the image of his face. I was too terrified to sleep that night. I sat in the dark, eyes wide open, phone in hand waiting. The sound came again, more distinct this time. A faint tapping, just like the night before everything had changed. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was some twisted response to my own fear, some leftover anxiety from the old house. But I couldn't deny what I was hearing. When Dad came home that night, I showed him the video. He didn't know what to say, but he agreed we should speak to the landlord. The last thing he wanted was to find out someone had been living in our walls again. The landlord was terrified when we explained everything. He didn't believe me at first, but when he checked the walls, his face went pale. There was a small hidden opening in the drywall. And behind it, he found something that made both of us freeze. Another room. Not big, but enough for someone to hide. There were the same signs again. Old wrappers, crumbs, a broken flashlight, and even a few pieces of clothing. The worst part. The clothes were fresh, recently worn. They were in our walls. It wasn't just one person either. There were traces of food, as if someone had been living there with more than one other person. I'm not sure how they had gotten inside, but I was sure they had been watching me, just like the man before. That night, I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid, but a feeling in the pit of my stomach told me it wasn't over. The terror of knowing someone had been living behind those walls was one thing, but what if they were still there? Still watching? The next few days were filled with strange events. I started hearing things at night again. Sounds of movement, footsteps outside the window, breathing. My dad still insisted it was just nerves, but that nagging feeling refused to leave me. Then it got worse. A few nights after we discovered the hidden room, I came home late from visiting a friend. The apartment was dark, but I didn't think much of it. What I did think was strange was that the front door was slightly ajar. I froze. My dad was already asleep, but something wasn't right. I stepped into the apartment slowly, the hairs on my neck standing up. The feeling of someone watching me was overwhelming. The kitchen light flickered on, but the rest of the apartment stayed silent. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Right next to me. It was too close. I turned, my heart racing, and I saw the outline of a figure in the dark, a silhouette just beyond the hallway. Someone standing in the shadows. But before I could react, they had disappeared. I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't a memory or a nightmare. Someone was here, and I had no idea who they were or how long they'd been waiting.